Well, hello and good morning, everybody. How are we doing? This is Jeremiah, and we are having a webinar today. We're going to be doing some SketchUp stuff. Hope you're ready. This is going to be a pretty good one. I just have a couple housekeeping items before we get rolling. I want to remind you this is being recorded. And in fact, we'll probably mention a few times. It's probably going to be best to just kind of watch. Don't necessarily try to follow along in real time, but it's being recorded for you so that you can later follow along and just pause it a little more easily. So letting you know about that. But we do also really want your feedback, even in real time. That's why there's that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. But in fact, if you click it right now, like I just did, get it oriented on your screen like I just did, it's going to make it pretty easy for me to type answers to your questions, but note that you're going to be able to see the answers that I type to other people's questions. So it makes a fun little companion to the webinar. You're not watching a recording. This is live. We're really here. So anyway, that's enough of my yibber yabber. I'm going to get this handed over to Jake, and we're going to rock and roll.
Awesome. Thank you, Jer. Welcome, everybody. I'm particularly excited about this. One, because I consider myself a SketchUp enthusiast. I do know the power of SketchUp, and if you've seen any of the other webinars that we've done on SketchUp, you'll hear the same spiel of how cool it can be and how beneficial. So we're going to just sort of cook through a little PowerPoint here so that we can get going live. I do want to continue to remind everybody, just like JR said, if you have a specific workflow, if you have a specific question or frustration with the workflow that you've got currently in SketchUp and trying to model things and stuff like that, definitely let us know. I can't guarantee that we'll get to it from like a advanced or a skilled level set, because we are going to be covering a lot of basic stuff. While basic, it might be completely new to you, but just really giving you the tools and understanding just from the very start of things that we're here to kind of bestow upon you that empowerment of being able to just model. So we'll definitely talk really quick about some of the frustrations that I've seen and that we've heard from people. So getting right into it, we're going to consider these teething issues. Those little things that might hold up the project or stumble across as you start with a new client or an existing client. Maybe you're getting into SketchUp, but really understanding what some of these issues are that clients actually have. A lot of expectations, obviously, but a lot of times the client expects to actually see a model for every project. Now, whether this is an existing client and you have provided these to them in the past and now they just expect that, that can be a little bit frustrating, and especially when it comes down to them changing their mind all the time and so on and so forth. So they also expect not to pay for it, which is which is one of the biggest frustrations I think we come into contact with. So how can we actually educate? This is all about education for the client, but they also want to have it immediately. And so when they don't understand what it takes to create a model, they don't appreciate it. So I think all of these things kind of are summed up in one word, and that's communication. So whether or not this little diagram I know is floated around for a while, but it's one of my favorites because it really hones in on the lack of communication a lot of times. And if we can have these harder conversations, however hard the conversation is, but I always say educate the client. They don't know what they don't know. It's up to you as the designer to be able to communicate properly and effectively what it is that they should be expecting, which then gets into understanding those expectations. So I think the biggest thing that is sort of like the weakest link in that communication is being clear about those deliverables. What are they actually expecting to see? Because if you have something in your mind of what you plan to show them versus what they plan to see, almost 100% of the time, it's going to end in a lot of rework on somebody's part or frustrations on somebody's part. So just understanding what those deliverables are. What is that model going to focus on? What is it going to be used for? How detailed do they need it to see or expect it to be? And then how is it going to be created, first of all, and then presented? So is it just going to be a picture that you print out? Or are you going to do a fly through live, example through a video or something like that? But all of these things, are you going to do it in Photoshop and not actually in SketchUp and just do a, a perspective sketch? All of these things really, really tailored to what it is that and how the client's going to kind of react to this stuff. So we're obviously assuming that we're providing 3D models because that's what we're here to watch. But I think it's important to note that one of those things that they might envision in their mind is they're expecting to see their site exactly. And if you come to them with something like this, they're going to maybe be less thrilled. But if they know this is what you plan to show them because it's a spatial progress on the 3D design or whatever it is, if you can share past project examples or an example of what you plan to provide, there's definitely going to be less headache on that. And of course, give them price points. It's okay to not obviously give away all your cards, show all your cards, but tell them that this costs money. This takes time. And if they don't appreciate that, then we've got another little channel of discussions we have to have, obviously. But it's not ever free. On one plate or the other, it's not ever free. So if they can appreciate the value of what this provides, there shouldn't be an issue. It's just about coming to the right dollar amount, obviously. So to maximize the efficiency and stuff like that and reduce the cost, obviously that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to speed up and simplify those designs. So again, quick note, there is a difference between that down and dirty model to just show the concepts and sort of shapes of places and stuff like that to get your point across, or if it's actually going to be used in some other execution way or presentation way that they need something else. So can't stress that enough. Moving right on into the future of things, and this is just something that kind of hits home to a lot of people that either are new to CAD and have done things by hand and have finally made the jump. I think 3D is one of those things that we got to kind of assume that people are going to start expecting it, and we've probably already seen that. So how long before we actually stop avoiding that 3D side of things? So again, hitting home the point that this webinar should try to empower you to just get in there and start playing with stuff, because there's no easy way around trying to learn a new program. And this is no different than those. So what kind of resources do we have available? Obviously can help with that. But this last point is pretty key, I think. And if you think about, as you model stuff and take the time to actually create content, that's just basically building your library so that you can be more efficient on the next one. So just keep that in mind as well as you're doing this stuff. Don't try to just do it as, oh, I'm going to get this one done and out the door. We just gotta think about it as, let's build our library up so that we can do whatever we want to whenever we want to. So gonna just pause for just a second to just tell you, look, there are a ton of resources. If you don't see what you're hoping to see in this webinar, we have a lot of documentation, and those watching the recording are obviously going to see the links below, but we will post the links to all of these kind of things, these resources here, so that you can check them out. But from very, very basic stuff to way more advanced terrain modeling with our friend Daniel Tall. There's a lot of stuff out there. So just keep that in mind. But my good friend Bob Wiley always said baby steps. Just keep that in mind. Don't try to get into SketchUp and think that you're going to model the Taj Mahal. You know, you got to start small. You got to play around with it, but you're going to start to find things. You're going to start to build on those skill sets, and you're going to be able to do stuff very, very quickly. So just keep that in mind as well. I'm going to pause here for those watching the recording that we are probably not going to get to most of these, but very cool plugins. And we're going to try not to touch too much on plugins, but I might use some here and there as we're doing things. So just know that to speed up that efficiency even more, there are so many plugins. There's such a good community of extra tools to help speed up the process for a lot of things. So when I was preparing for this webinar, I found some really snazzy tools that I didn't even know about that I'm going to have to relook at my workflow. So from that, I know that was super quick, but I want to get right into the modeling stuff. So remind everybody to keep that Q&A going, start getting your questions in. Want to make sure that we try to address stuff as things come up or what you anticipate to show, because I do want to show stuff live if it can help your workflow. So where do we start? Understanding your project and your resources is, I think, the biggest and the most key thing here. And we can always just start here, right in SketchUp, or obviously we have our CAD design. So being able to understand where we have to begin will definitely help choose the path that we need to go down to be the most efficient in how we start to set up that model. So I'm going to kind of go through two different examples sort of simultaneously. So just keep in mind that I am bouncing back and forth between different plans. Maybe they have different scenarios, and I have different resources available for each one of these. So I'm gonna start out with a design that I did for a client, and I wasn't provided much. I just had to do it all from scratch. But where do I start with this from a 3D perspective? Well, SketchUp actually has a great resource, which is what we're probably already using in some fashion, is Google Earth. So if we were to go up to File, and I'm using the Mac SketchUp for Mac, but it's going to be very, very similar, if not the same, for where you'll find these tools on the PC side. So we're going to go to geolocation, and we're going to add more imagery. The ability to add a location. Now, I've already obviously pinpointed my site, but being able to enter an address and find out where your site is obviously super crucial. This is something that is brand new, fresh, so unfortunately I couldn't trace or have a place to actually get any of the line work. I had to create it all myself. So, this might be a scenario, but I can at least start positioning stuff and understanding what, again, talking with the client, what it is that we're trying to achieve. Do they want to see spatial analysis? Do they want to see how the sun is hitting onto the landscape? All those things. How does it interact with the terrain that they're on? All those things are obviously very important as we start going. So I'm just going to go ahead and select a region. We'll go ahead and pick this spot right here. That looks good. This is my site, let's say. I'm going to go ahead and import him. And the cool thing is that this is now geolocated, and it's just an image, and it is positioned exactly where it is in the world. So that right off the bat helps me understand, what it is. I can just start my design here. I have all of my tools to be able to draw stuff. And again, we're going to breeze over that basic stuff. But how do we start to get our design into SketchUp. Now that we have like our site and we have at least a reference point of where to go. Well, I'm gonna kind of refer back to this one quite a bit as being able to model or simplify what you create. So while you might not be 100% comfortable drafting in SketchUp, because obviously we're now drafting in 3D, so you don't know exactly where this line is going. It just totally messes with you as you start to draw stuff. So we need to obviously use the tools that we're comfortable with in order to still achieve that same goal, which if we're all familiar with CAD, because that's what we're using, we're integrating this plan into the site, now we can actually utilize some tools. This one obviously is a land effects tool, but just simply utilizing our 3D connection tool to send what we need. Now, again, we can send specific layers, so I can go ahead and just click on something and it will disappear for me so that I can just shoot over anything and everything that I need just as like reference points and run amok with all of that stuff. But I think what's more important is that we are smart with what we send over, because if you're at all familiar with SketchUp, you can import just an entire CAD drawing. And I'm going to sort of do this same kind of thing over here, and I'm going to send over some of these line works for this this plan. So this was a plan that was given to me, and I did the design around it, but I want to make sure that I have some of the basic features over in SketchUp. So I know I want the house over there, and I want, just some reference points to things so that I know where I need to start modeling the overhang, sure, right? So I can send these things over to SketchUp, and it's not there yet. It's floating up in the magical cloud. But I want to show you the difference between just sending stuff over and making sure that you properly set stuff up before you start working with it in SketchUp. So first we're going to start here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose, I got another screen, apologize. I'm going to choose some stuff here. So this was my house, and I'm going to bring my house over here. So it's like, all right, great. I've now got line work for my house. But as you can see, whoever made the house did a pretty poor job from providing me clean line work, right? I don't have a face here. It sort of popped up some of the edges. I now have to spend my time cleaning up this house and hopefully trying to connect it, because there's just no way around getting a face onto this thing. I can draw a rectangle if I wanted to. Let's make it bigger so it shows up. And you can see that that didn't even work. So I got to move this down to the proper place here. And you can use your reference points. And what I'm doing to hold those constraints and stuff like that is using the arrow keys to snap into specific directions, and then holding shift so that it goes to the specific axis. So, and we'll touch on that one in a little bit. But basically, I need to sit here and try to match up with all of this line work. Oops. See, I didn't even snap to the right thing. So you can see how big of a pain this is to try to line things up with actually working. There we go. So now it's on there. It's intersected some of those, but I still have this open face. So I got to sit here and try to do cleanup and model in SketchUp, and hopefully I'm doing the proper lines, but that's still not closing up for some reason. It just gets really frustrating, right? So let's work in a tool that we know. Let's work in AutoCAD. we know that there's some open lines in certain areas. So why don't we just troubleshoot those? Again, making sure that we're still following clean practices with whether we create a temp layer, you know, to draw all of our temporary stuff on. However you want to do it, I guess it really doesn't matter. That's up to your preference there. But I can go ahead, and we know what we're doing here. We know that we're cleaning and closing up lines. We can work really fast in here. We have other commands that we can run to try to generate additional line work. So if we can generate a boundary simply by clicking on the inside of this thing to get like an actual whole outline of the building, I'm done, right? I know now that this is a closed polyline. So why don't I send that layer over? So just thinking about these work smarter, not harder types of practices here. So I just sent that layer over. And now why don't we come over here and drop him over. And here's my temp layer. And there it was. Looks like I had another line somewhere in the drawing. But that already filled it out for me. So how easy was that versus the first way, right? So what kind of resources do we have in order to do that? Now I can start bringing in my other line work now, because I know that I had my, what did I have? My driveway that I could do. And obviously we're going to have differences when the line work has elevations that we have to handle and stuff like that. But even then, you know, how are we treating the stuff that comes in? This is one of the next really, really important things to remember is once we start working with content in SketchUp, and this is something, it's one of those basic things to know, but a super, super key one is once we start connecting lines into this and make our points and connecting into other objects and stuff like that, we start hurting the integrity of the drawing. And I don't mean that in a totally poor way. It's not affecting this per se, but if I try to move him, now I start getting these issues. And when the client says, oh, this changed or the wall moved or whatever it was, we now have a way more bigger issue on our hands from a revisiting and restructuring and redrawing standpoint. So what we should do, however you bring in the line work, you should always, all things considered, this obviously has a caveat, but make things into their own separate groups, okay? Because what you can do, not only is it easier to you know, select and drag over stuff even if it was a part of another group, but to deselect instead of clicking on each individual line and then being able to make a group out of this. But you can be a little less careful with what you're missing on moving at the same time. So I know all of this is grouped together. I know I can move this up, and I can go inside of that group and I can still make my changes. I can still, you know, tag on to the additional lines and stuff on the outside, but I now have free reign to make additional modifications to things if I need to. So right off the bat, as we're starting these imports of all of our lines and stuff like that, we need to make sure that we properly group and component things that we can sort of plan on future adjustments and stuff like that, right? We need to look to the future for a lot of these things. So I'm going to jump back over to this guy now, and we can do the same thing. We can bring over our line work here, and you can see that I don't need any of this stuff. So I ran the same kind of command and found, or I created my own house footprint layer so that it was clean and nice and neat. But so I can just leave everything else out. So we're going to go back over here and we're going to work with our site or with our image here for just a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import that layer. And you can see, oh, where did it go? Well, obviously we've got some differing in elevations, so I can go ahead and just select that guy and move him up above. And of course I want to make him a group. And we're good to go, right? We can place him on the land, if you will, and we can pop him up to whatever his height of the building is. And again, looking at some of the component or the plugins that I have, this one works pretty well. Is drop to drop the component to the ground, and it dropped that thing so that it's sitting flush on my plan here. So I can just start to model stuff. I can start doing my line work and everything else, and it's not affecting the picture. But what happens when I want to try to bring in that topography, or do I even have the topography? Well, SketchUp has, and this is part of, I've just pulled this one button out, but it's definitely a part of this geolocation side where you can show the terrain. It's this little button here. Is it will toggle the terrain obviously as good as it can from Google Earth. So if it's not accurate terrain, then you got to figure that out. But if it's close, and if you're familiar with the site and you can see that it's good, we can obviously see that we've got to make a few adjustments. Now, we're obviously just going to drop him up on top, and we can put him down onto the ground. Again, use the axes to your advantage, right? When you're starting to move models around on the stuff, make sure that you can inference properly. So I'm just holding in the blue direction and holding shift, and no matter where I move, it's going to lock it that way. So I can start getting a better feel for how it's going to land. Now, obviously, it's not sitting on the ground properly, so how do we account for that? We're going to go back to the question, what kind of detail do you need, and how accurate do you need to be for this? Is it as easy as dropping it, and maybe the height of the building is set to what it is? So let's go inside here and let's adjust the footprint itself, not move the building height so it's under the ground, because then it's going to be in an inaccurate height. But man, this is sort of hard to get through here. So what other tools do I have to work quickly and efficiently within models? Well, there's under view, there's a component edit, and there's a hide rest of model or hide similar components. I've actually set up a shortcut key for hide rest of model as Shift H. So I can hit Shift H and it disappears. So I can actually go under here very easily without any obstructions, and I can sort of know that this is, I'm going to start an extra face here just by pressing the pull key and then pressing the Alt key. But then it creates another face and leaves that original face there. So I'm just going to pull them down into the basement, and I can do Shift H to see what that's going to look like. And that's obviously far enough, so that's great. It can be that easy to pull in your stuff, okay? If you need, obviously, to model the terrain, that's the next important part, but we're gonna hold off on that unless we hear from 100% of the people that that's that's their biggest issue. And don't worry, we plan to do another webinar on a lot of advanced stuff too. But anyways, so that's what we can do with that. Let's go over to our lobster mansion here, and let's bring in a couple more layers. So I'm going to bring in my topography, and we're going to start topography from scratch here. So we've got, this is the line work from the CAD file itself that I just brought over. That's the layer. But how are we supposed to build that terrain, right? We need some kind of tool. Well, I'm going to introduce you to, if you're not familiar with it already, the sandbox tool is a great way, and we'll go ahead and just deselect those. So it's just that. And again, depending on how you're working, this would be a wise choice before you get too far to actually right click and make it a group, so that if I needed to move something, I don't have to try to select every layer and or every piece of line and try to move it that way. So I can go inside of this guy. This also makes it really nice so that I can use that Control or Shift H to hide everything else. So I'm just focusing on this. But I'm going to go ahead and select everything, and I'm going to use this from contours in the sandbox tool. And what that's going to do is it's going to stitch a mesh together, and it's going to group itself aside from the actual line work itself. So it's, again, a really nice companion to that function there. But now, if we really need to, we can go ahead and take this line work and delete it if we need to. And now we have our actual terrain. So there's our terrain. It's accurate. Now we need to figure out, what we're going to do with this kind of line work. So I'm going to bring it up above. I can do the same thing that we did to the other one. Simply drop him in and pull him up so that he's through the terrain, but we're not messing with the integrity of anything, right? So that is a completely valid way if that's all we're going for, obviously. We can match this to the blue here, match to the bottom just so it's there. But now you can start to see, oh man, my line work's really not jiving there. So what other kind of tools do we have in order to represent our design on top of this? Well, another SketchUp sandbox tool is our drape tool, or is the drape tool. And if I click on him while my line work is selected, I can select another mesh to drape it on, and it will actually drape that flat line work across the actual terrain. So we can keep with the terrain, and let's just say delete that one now, and we know exactly that that's how it's going to work, right? So these are the kind of quick tools that we can start doing just to get the basic level design on here. And I'm going to bring in one more thing because I want to focus now on components a little bit and the importance of drafting smarter, not harder. So I'm going to bring in our trellis. I believe it's right there. So again, I'm going to, right off the bat, before I move any of it, I'm just going to make him a group so that I can move him up in the world. Okay, so this is where our trellis was going, if you remembered the CAD plan, right? So how do we actually create something that's usable, that's 3D from that with relative ease, I should say. Now, you'll notice this, and maybe this is something you're used to seeing and just have accepted it, but you can see how this this line work, when I grouped it, it grouped it to the overall axis of this model, okay? So if you keep in mind the red and the green there, you can see that that box is defined by that original axis. And that's not what we want for a couple reasons. You might be used to it, and if you double click inside, you can see that it's showing you that temporary axis point of where it created that group. Well, that's not what we want in order to quickly draft stuff, okay? We want to be able to make sure that our inference points, and as we're inferencing things, that this direction is our red and our green, because that's going to make a lot of things much simpler to draft, and I'll explain that to you by giving you this little demonstration. If I were to try and copy him. And obviously I can copy him along a line so that he's, you know, at the same position there. But if I try to scale him and flip him any way, it starts going based on that group axis direction. So I can't just simply flip him and keep him mirrored the same direction. It's much, much harder to start working with him that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to reset this group. So if I go inside of that group and I am close here, or if I go up and pick the axis tool here in tools and go to axes, I can right click somewhere on near one of the axis directions and say place. It gives me this additional point, and I can now control exactly where I want red and green to go. And obviously considering blue to be straight up, I don't want to do it this way and have up and turn this thing upside down, right? I definitely need to keep him in the up direction. So I can go ahead and pick him that way. So now, if I close out of that group and select it again, look how clean that is. It's really, really nice because now as I move him, I can obviously reference a perpendicular spot or parallel spot. And when I use the scale button, it is now perfectly to what I need. Okay, so that is such a key point as we're starting to make stuff. The goal here is not only simplifying what we're creating, but it's drafting it right the first time. So it might not be simple to create. The items that you're creating might not be simple, but if you've set it up properly, it's going to be much easier next time, or if there's a need to make changes. So the next thing that we're going to kind of focus on real quick is components. I can't tell you how often I did not follow this as I first started. Not only that, but grouping, obviously. I would put everything into one set, and it was a nightmare trying to move stuff. But when it comes to edits and changes, things like this, how can I speed up the process here? Obviously, I've got line work, and I made those copies really easily, and I put them across there. But that's not a very efficient way when I have to make changes on anything. So what we're going to do is we're just going to simply select this line work, and we're going to make it a component. Without going too far into the component structure, because we have covered those in other webinars, I'm just going to stress the point that we definitely should be defining each component, because our end goal here is to be able to use this in future projects. And if they're hard to read, and if it just says component 1 through 100, there's not a very beneficial way of knowing what it is that you're picking. So definition and description is super key here. So I'm just going to say this is a trellis beam. Why not? Now we can set that component access so that we're not just accepting it from that point, but we can position where we want. If I were to insert another one of these specific components, how would it insert? So I'm just going to go ahead and go here, and I'm going to create it. So if I wanted to, and we'll go ahead and just see what the distance is here, 7.5 inches. I'm going to delete all these other ones. I've got this component now, and I'm going to go ahead and move. Oh, I should measure proper. 11.5 inches. There we go. Okay. So if we go ahead and take him and start moving him, press Alt in that direction there, since we're nice and lined up in that group axes there, we have that proper direction now that we can just simply use that axis to guide us here. So 11.5 inches. And I'm going to go ahead and go 12 times. So before doing anything else, I can hit the number of keys and start getting that size that I want very, very quickly. So now that I've done that, what's really cool about this is I can just simply go into one of these guys, and if I need to make a change, and especially if it was like, oh man, I gotta remove all these things and do that every time. Well, it's just making one change and all of them change at the same time. So if we go ahead and take him, we'll say 4 inches, so he's a nice square beam there. And we can start making changes to this trellis literally in one item. I'll go ahead and pull him this way. Let's say 2 inches. That looks great. And I'm already done. So how cool is that to be able to get that kind of structure and that speed in that amount of time? So once we've got that guy, maybe we have to do another awesome. So thing here, let's put an awesome little beam. And again, trying to use these inference points to speed up the whatever we're doing here. So if we go in this direction and go not lock that way. If I hover over that point, I should be able to lock in this way. And so I can see my dimensions down at the bottom. As I'm growing down this way, obviously that's changing that. So we're going to go ahead and go 14 by 12. Oh, see, that was too short, so I can definitely change that. I can move it, whatever I need to do. But I'm now trying to edit this guy, and I tried to select him, but I double-clicked into that group. Now that's a big pain in the butt. So again, I'm actually going to go ahead and come outside of that back into my this component. But every time I try to click on it, it keeps going back there. So again, what kind of tool do I have? Oh wait, hide rest to model. Now I can double click on him, super easy, make him a component. Let's call him back beam. And if we were going to do this right, we can set that component axis. Where do we want to be able to insert him after? It looks like he's already set as good as I want him, so that's fine. So we'll just go ahead and escape out of that, and we'll go ahead and create. So now he's a beam, but I'm going to go ahead and unhide stuff. Let's pop him out the proper direction. And let's even pull him back to where he needs to be. So again, making these kind of little changes allows me to do this. Now, maybe I need a beam at the front, right? But maybe that beam in the front is supposed to be a little bit different. Well, I just made a copy of that component, so he's going to be a little bit challenging to treat differently, because anything that I do to him, it'll be done to the back. So I can right click on him, make unique, and now he's actually, if we look at our entity info, he's actually a back beam 1. So we can, he's got his own definition, but we can definitely just rename him to make sure that he's, properly defined. And then we can go ahead and we can start doing stuff to him. So we can push him up. Maybe he was a little bit of a fatter beam. And again, don't judge my woodworking skills. It might not be a right size, but you get the point. So we can go ahead and put a little curve on here because it's nice and pretty. And I'm so fancy that I'm going to go ahead and do some more woodwork structure just like that. And then I can use tools like follow me on those kind of faces. Oops. So then pick that guy, do follow me. There, he's a cool beam. That's my default guy, just like that. Maybe he's upside down. Who knows? So, anyways, that's the kind of speed that we can do stuff. Now, of course, he's in a component already, or he's in a group, more or less. So we can definitely change him into a component, and we can just call him trellis. And he's got a good enough access point that I can insert him just right there and be fine. So we'll create. Now, why did I go through all that effort? I definitely have a point in mind here. And that is, we can now save these components, not only just in this model, but we can create collections. And these collections can then be utilized in other points without doing any other kind of work. So you might have a file that you have a bunch of stuff that you just pull from, which is totally fine, and might just work to your needs there. But from a cleaner perspective, we should just keep everything in and of itself separate items. That way we can make modifications to that one thing, save the changes, and then when we pull from it again, it's updated. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to go to my my components here and go to what's actually in my model, and I can see that I've created a few things here. What I can do is, with that little option to the right there, we can save as a local collection. And obviously there's other options to do here, but we're focused on saving a local collection. And I'm actually going to put it into a final place that I've got set up that I want all of my collections to go. So we're going to go ahead and make a new folder, and this is going to be my trellis folder. And this is where I can save other trellises and styles and stuff like that. Absolutely. So when I save that, if we go to our options, you can see now I have an actual set of stuff. So we're going to just go right over to this one just for fun. And we are going to see in the model itself, we have nothing. But I now have this collection called trellis. And I not only have a full trellis that I can just insert, and of course it is obviously just inserting on that specific axis. If you recognize, our red was coming along that backside there. So it placed it there, and of course I can just simply grab a spot and flip it very, very easily to go and use. So right off the bat, I now have that flexibility to start doing any other kind of work in any other drawings just like that. Now, what if I made changes to this? I'm going to show you a fun little tool that I found. It's called TrueBend. And this allows me to take a component and it bends all of the geometry, and I can set specific angles for it or whatever, and then accept it, and it will fix it for me. Okay. And what's cool about that is not only did it do that, but I can now save that as a new collection here. Oops, I got to go to my this thing here. So I can go ahead and I can save as a local collection. I can save it in here. I can, do it as a new folder, however you want to do it. But what's cool about that is it created, go back over to this guy here, into our original guy. It created an actual, if I were to delete him and purge out, there we go. So it created a whole new definition of that guy that I can use in the plan and update my stuff without reworking any of that kind of stuff. So again, TrueBend is a plugin, and you can go find it in the warehouse, which kind of leads me to my next point, is using your resources. And Tom makes this one, by the way. But we got to work smarter, right? And that means that we have a lot of resources available, not only from the plugins that we're using, but the actual components. They have a 3D warehouse. So to be able to search, I would definitely say we should go here first before just making something. And I go here all the time because more often than not, there's something very similar to what you're trying to achieve. Here's the caveat. This is a 3D library, and most anybody can post here. So while their intentions may be good, there might not be proper setup stuff, proper scaled things, insertion points. I have found more often than not that every single one of these guys, and I'll just show you one more trick really quick, is this is, and I don't know why it's not, oh, you know what, I forgot, I just got to explode it. Okay, so now I have all these little components in here. A really quick trick to, instead of sitting here and selecting all of these, you can actually take whatever that component is, so beam 6, let's just say, or one of these guys, and you can actually, and this one isn't going to be a great example because they're all unique, because they're all different. So I guess I'll just really quickly show you this. You can take that component that you know, beam 6, and you can right click in it from its from the actual component dialog box and say select instances, and it'll select all of those instances for you. So that's a pretty quick trick though. But more often than not, getting back to this, is it'll be like this. When you bring it in, it'll just be line work, and it's just such a nightmare. So just understanding what you're getting into as you search the warehouse definitely will either hurt or help your workflow as well. So I do want to stop there. We have a lot of other stuff that I would like to jump onto if we don't have any questions, Jer.
No, I think I was able to get the questions we got. So,
Okay.
but just want to remind people, yeah, I'm sure if you have that Q&A box up, you've seen the answers I typed to those other ones, and if you have some thoughts yourself, please feel free to ask away.
Yeah, hopefully I'm not boring anybody. I find this extremely interesting. So anyways, let's go to something a little bit more challenging, right? We've had a request from the client, and they said that they want a patio on the back, and obviously there's something, to be said about showing it how it's going to look, right? So especially if we start getting into the terrain stuff, this is a little bit more forgivable, as we get in here and we actually paint. Let's just say we randomly had see, I didn't even have all those closed, so that's hurtful. It's hard to even paint stuff on that like that. So again, obviously line of work cleanup is important, but if things were painted, you could probably get away with showing the roadway like that. You didn't need to necessarily grade it out too much, but you're definitely going to be called out when your patio's drooping down the down the face here. So what kind of tools do we have available here? Well, we could go through and try to muscle our way and use the proper axes to guide ourselves, but holy smokes, is that hard to draw there. We obviously have a lot of other plugins. Tools on Surface is one really great one that actually does follow the terrain, and I can draw exactly on the terrain if I want to. and then you can see it's because I didn't do it in the group itself. It would cut in a face, but you can see that I just drew all of that without sitting there trying to snap to stuff. So I could actually take and fill that out and make it into a surface exactly for what it is. But that still doesn't give me what I want. I want to be able to show the patio flat and flushed and stamped into here properly. So I'm actually going to say use your resources. Go back to CAD. Come here. You know that you're going to be working in 2D, so you know that you want to come from this corner out to here. It's going to come this way, and it's going to come to here. So there's this whole flat spot, and I'm going to just go ahead and continue on here and close this up so that it's just one solid line for me, quick and easy. So I'm just going to go ahead and send that. So without taking much more than half a minute to actually create my patio area, I didn't have to deal with the 3D aspects of things. All I needed to do was draw the shape that I wanted to, and then I'm going to come here and I'm going to import that layer. So I'll bring in temp again, and there it is. I'm going to make sure he's a group, just like normal, and I'm going to bring him up. Okay. So here he is. Sweet, he matches exactly where I want him, but again, I've got that issue of where to position him, okay? Well, we have a lot of different tools. We can sit there and try to stitch the sides together, but I'm going to go back to the sandbox tool because it's free, and I'm going to say we have this stamp tool. And the stamp tool takes one group and allows it to have an offset of that overall shape, okay? And stamp it into another mesh. And so depending on how big of a taper we want and stuff like that, we can fudge around with that. Maybe it's literally a 1 foot offset, and it's just really straight up and down. Maybe it's a 1 inch offset. You know, this is the kind of stuff that we got to figure out, right? But we're going to go ahead and stamp it into this base. And now I can create that platform for the actual pad to sit down on top of. And I can just drop him on to there. And now he's into the actual terrain. So if I go in here, let's hide my model, you can see that it actually stamped that right into the terrain. And maybe that's fine, that works, but maybe we needed to actually create a wall or a fence around it. So taking all of these different things that we've learned, making sure that we've grouped things properly, I'm going to go ahead and keep grouping things because I'm making new instances of stuff. I know that he's going to be a fence that goes up along the wall. So I need to cut, I think this is where my wall was. I can't remember. So I need to take that stuff out completely, but I still need to be able to lift this up. There. So as we come here, we can now start seeing those changes. Oh, look, it looks like it's hanging outside. So how do I go ahead and just push him down into the ground? Just hide it. You know, these are the kind of things that we can get away with, especially when it's just a really quick look at this is how it's going to look on the actual stuff without it hurting really anything, right? So a few more minutes, Jer. Any other questions?
I'll let you know again. I'm typing away like a madman. I hope I'm answering these questions correctly. You know, little things like tapping the arrow key to lock it into a certain axis, and just reminding people where they can get our our SketchUp plugin to be able to send the layers over, things like that. So, really just kind of recapping because
Yeah,
you're moving fast, of course,
I am
but
moving
no, it's
fast.
fine. But keep on because we got 60 seconds.
Okay. So yeah, just again, harnessing those tools to your benefit, obviously. And I'm a big fan, again, and you're seeing this, is is to try to work smarter, not harder. And so if I can get the look that I need, especially when a client's not paying me, is just going to be super, super important, to be able to just go, okay, yeah, look, you wanted a fence here, or something like that. You wanted to see what it looks like. Well, utilize those tools, to your benefit. I'm going to take this guy, kind of inset him in, intersect him in there. Let's see, and pull him down just a little bit, just so he's cut all the way through. Um, but to take like this guy and use the intersect faces with selection. And what that's going to do is it's going to basically trace both of these things and create my line work, for what it is. And so I can actually create the shape of where that fence actually needs to be, create elevations and stuff like that. So there's just so many tools. So to kind of recap as well, I think if you can just look at some of the existing tools, get familiar with them, not only the buttons, but shortcuts. You can see that I didn't go up to a lot of these things at all. But to be able to take your stuff, and see this kind of stuff here, and just really quickly harness just a lot of different tools to help speed up the process of what it is that you're doing, is going to just absolutely make the biggest difference when you're going through and starting to do your thing. Shortcuts are what's going to make you very, very efficient, in what you do. So just get familiar with those, and play. Just we're empowering you to play is all I can say. So thank you. And if there's any other questions, we'll just take them.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, if any questions, roll in real quick. But also, please reach out to us with what you'd like to see in future SketchUp webinars. As we were prepping for this, we were kind of, obviously deciding what this one should focus on, and Jake found so many great plugins, so we were talking about doing another webinar specifically on all these great plugins, than what they can offer. And we're even doing a series of webinars, so it can be really carefully step by step. Let us know what you're interested in. I know, just speaking for myself, when I finally just forced myself to get in and model something dorky, it was the silliest thing imaginable. Jake knows because he saw it.
Yeah.
I had this crazy idea of what I wanted to model, and I finally just go, you know what? I'm just going to get in there and I'll model this crazy idea for an invention. And it's totally stupid. It'll never make money, but it made me learn SketchUp, and now I feel a lot more comfortable. I can get in there and actually do things, and that's all it takes is just getting in there and doing it. But on that note, hey, it is time to break for lunch and things wonderful. So I hope you enjoyed it, and have a safe and happy weekend.
Thanks, guys.